Michigan proved over the weekend, Drew, that they did not need Coach Harbaugh to get it done at Penn State. James Franklin continues to show that he struggles in the big games against Michigan and Ohio State. And it looks like Michigan and Ohio State are the clear-cut 1 and 2 this year in the Big Ten. Drew, Michigan all year, they've just been completely dominating opponents. And in this Penn State game, I feel like they pretty much controlled Penn State the whole way through.
Yeah, and it was the same thing we saw last year, right? Michigan really got it done on the ground. When you have a running game that Michigan has, as efficient as it is, you can take that to another game, to another stadium, and be just fine, regardless of how big the game is. And we saw that again from Michigan. JJ McCarthy, there was not a lot of pressure on him to really get the job done throwing the ball through the air. And when you're able to do that as a team, it just makes life so much easier for you because when you're running the ball, it just seems like less could go wrong when you're running the football compared to when you're having to throw the football, right? Penn State, there is no bigger supporter or a fan of James Franklin than me. I like James Franklin as a coach. I think he does a good job with how he talks to his players, how he handles the media. I think James Franklin does all the right things, but he just can't get it done in the big games. And until we see it happen, there's got to be a legitimate question at Penn State in terms of, is this the route? How long are you going to be willing to go through this route where you win all the games you're supposed to win, but you just can't get over that hump against those one or two teams? James Franklin wins a lot of games. A lot of it, though, is because of who they play in the Big Ten, though, Aiden. And this is going to make some people mad. Some people might disagree with this. James Franklin is very similar to Jimbo Fisher. Now, obviously, Jimbo Fisher record-wise and James Franklin record-wise are two totally different things. But again, you got to see who Jimbo Fisher is playing versus who James Franklin's playing. Both of these games have the same. Both of these coaches have the same common denominator, though. They can't win the big games that they're really supposed to win with the talent they have on their team. Both these teams, Texas A&M and Penn State, are very talented. They're supposed to be national, icons of college football and being able to compete at the national level. And another thing about James Franklin, too, is his inability to apparently get his quarterbacks ready for these big-time games. Drew Allar, outside of the Michigan game and outside of the Ohio State game, has looked phenomenal. Comparing him to Sean Clifford, I thought Drew Allar was much better than Sean Clifford. And I thought that's what Penn State needed if they were going to win these big games moving forward. Drew Allar, when he's played Michigan and Ohio State, Aiden, he doesn't look like he knows what he's doing. He looks scared. He looks confused. He looks like he's second-guessing himself. He looks unconfident. Everything wrong that you don't want to see in your quarterback, Drew Allar seems to possess when he plays these big games. I think that's on the coach. As a coach, it is up to you to get your first-year quarterback. You got to find a way to get him comfortable, and you got to develop a game plan to make it where he's not pressured into winning a game for you. And 2 times already this season, Drew Allar has really been kind of forced to throw Penn State back into the game, and he's just not ready for it. That's on James Franklin. So I guess the question I want to ask you, Aiden, what do you think, where do you think Penn State should go, and how do you think they feel about James Franklin now, and how long do you think they're going to put up with this?
As far as Drew Aller is concerned, Drew, he still is a very young quarterback. Of course, first-year starter. And you hinted to it. He has not been enabled by the play calling to get loose. They rank 120th in passes past 10 yards down the field. Iowa, who can't score, ranks like 103rd. Just to give you a hint, they're like 13 behind Iowa. So they are not throwing the ball downfield. It's hard to get in any type of rhythm when all you're doing is throwing hitches and comebacks and outs, the whole entire game. Then all of a sudden, you need to dial up a dot on 3rd and long. As far as James Franklin is concerned, it's going to be tough with the Big Ten bringing in all these great schools next year. Do you want to go into a rebuild with the Big Ten changing? I feel like you want to give James Franklin at least one more year to see how he does with the USCs and the Oregons. If he's still winning those games and then, loses to Michigan and Ohio State, I think he'd get himself an extra year, because next year the conference is going to be a lot tougher than how we've seen it historically. And, so you got to give him his chance as far as that's concerned. You don't want to go into a rebuild in the first year of bringing all these good teams into your conference, because then the history of your team in the new era is going to be in a rebuild. It's the same thing that might happen with Texas A&M. If these players leave, and Texas A&M is going to be looking at a rebuild in the SEC with teams like Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma. These are historic programs. Why wouldn't a kid go there? Why would he invest into a rebuild where he knows he's going to suck for 2 or 3 years in the modern era of football? So pretty much because of that, I think you got to give James Franklin at least 1 or 2 more years to see how he does in the, in the new era of the Big Ten. With that being said, though, Drew, this Penn State defense, as far as this game this past weekend goes, elite. How is Michigan able to run the football on them like that? This linebacking core is supposed to be one of the best in college football. Michigan did not throw a pass, I'm pretty sure, the entire second half. So as a coaching staff entirely, OC, DC, head coach, Penn State needs to step it up in these big games because I feel like the clock's ticking for some of these guys.
Yeah, and I agree. You made really good points about James Franklin moving forward and how he probably really needs to stay with the Big Ten changing the way that it is. You really don't want to go in a rebuild mode at the wrong time. But at the same time, and I think I've said this before too in a previous video, I think a lot of it's going to depend on who's available at the end of the season. Now, I'm not saying James Franklin's really on the hot seat per se. I don't think James Franklin's going to get fired. But I'm just saying in a scenario, fans have got to be getting tired of this. I don't know. I don't think we have a whole lot of Penn State fans on our channel. But I am curious to see if you are a Penn State fan watching this video, when is it going to be time for a change to be made? Georgia, when they had Mark Richt all those years, Georgia was a good football team, but Mark Richt was not winning the big games. Mark Richt was winning football games, though. He had success, but Georgia's a program that they thought could bring in another guy that can get them over that hump. Sometimes in college football, when you're a big name program, you got to be willing to make some big moves if you want to see your team go to where they want to go, which in Penn State case, they're at the level now where they want to be competing for national championships. James Franklin has not shown to me that he can be a national champion coach. What he did at Vanderbilt, getting Vanderbilt to 9 wins a couple years, is still an incredible feat. And he is a good coach, and he will always be a good coach strictly because of that. You can't be a bad coach and coach Vanderbilt to 9 wins. At the same time, though, this is a very similar situation that Penn State's dealing with that Georgia had with Mark Richt. Again, it's hard, and I get it. It is very hard to get rid of a guy like this. James Franklin's a great guy. Players love playing for him. But this is a business. You are there to win football games. You are there to win national championships. And if your team, and if people feel like you can never get your team there, eventually, like you said, Aiden, the clock's going to start ticking. But back to Michigan, Aiden, this is a big win for him, especially on the road at Penn State. Penn State doesn't seem to win the big games, and Michigan does. Jim Harbaugh is gone, though. He's not here for the remainder of the regular season. How do you think Michigan's going to fare out against Ohio State here in a couple weeks?
Yeah, I think that Coach Moore showed that he can coach the boys to a win. He's been the offensive coordinator for this Michigan team, and we know what Harbaugh likes to do offensively. Multiple tight ends, run the football down your throat, and then beat you over top with a 60-yard bomb. He has shown that he can pretty much coach, or call plays through that system. And, let's not forget, Harbaugh can still practice with the team and coach at practice. He's just not going to be there on game day. That is going to be a big factor in the Ohio State game. How big, I don't think anybody can truly know unless you're, with that team pretty much daily and how the OC is, in correlation to how much his players like him and how much of a head coach he is like. A lot of people are saying that this Michigan offensive coordinator is a top candidate to be a head coach somewhere else. And, with jobs opening up like Texas A&M and, schools like that, who knows where he could end up next year. But he's qualified to be a head coach. I just say that to say that. This Michigan offense can stay on schedule against any team in college football. That Penn State defense is elite, and they did not have to get off schedule one time. They got put in multiple third and mediums and third and longs by the Penn State defense. But, Drew, the Michigan offense converted every single time. And that's the sign of a great team. You are getting off the field on third down defensively and staying on the field on third down offensively. And Michigan was able to do that on both sides of the ball. short yardage situations on both sides of the ball. They are elite. And we saw this throughout the season from Michigan, but not against a team like Penn State. And they were able to replicate the same success without their head coach. That's truly impressive. J.J. McCarthy is a true threat with his legs as well as in the air. How he's matured, truly been remarkable. He's turned himself into a Heisman candidate. And against that Penn State game, he didn't have to throw the ball that much, but he was still, you could tell that he was making plays. His team constantly moving the ball for him, getting off schedule, getting it with his legs, extending the play with his legs, finding the threats downfield. He knows how to run an offense. This Michigan team, I think, might be the best team in the country. I know Georgia just put a whooping on Ole Miss, 52-17, but this Michigan team is fully complete on both sides of the ball. And against the Penn State defense, that Michigan offense ran straight through them, Drew. Controlled them the whole game.
And people always like to bring up this argument that Michigan and Georgia, just strictly because of who they played, they think that these two teams really aren't going to be anything meaningful in the postseason, which just couldn't be farther from the truth. Michigan and Georgia, regardless of who they played, if you know anything about college football, you can watch both these teams play these inferior opponents and know they're a great football team, right? And both Michigan and Georgia have made legitimate cases that they are probably the two teams to beat in college football. What these two teams have done over the past couple of weeks, and really when they've gotten to play against real competition and they've even amped it up even more, people were concerned about these two teams when they played, a really good team. The fact that these two teams were able to even step it up another notch when they played, when the stakes get higher, shows signs of good coaching and signs of elite football teams. So with that being said, when I'm looking a little ahead to this Ohio State game, an Ohio State team that, they have an impressive resume, I would say. You have a win on the road at Notre Dame, and then you have that win against Penn State. I don't see that just same vibe from Ohio State that I see from Michigan and Georgia. Michigan and Georgia are two teams that I've had to adapt to a lot of things, and so has Ohio State, but we've seen Ohio State just look more vulnerable, Aiden. And when I look at Michigan and Ohio State now, comparing these two teams, especially with this game being played at Michigan, despite what Michigan has going on with Jim Harbaugh and him not being able to coach in that game, it's just really hard to predict an Ohio State win.
Yeah, Ohio State, they rolled through their opponent this past week. Maserati Marvin Harrison, he did his thing. My thing with Ohio State, it's been this pretty much all year. Is Kyle McCord an elite quarterback? In the modern era of the college football playoff era, you need an elite quarterback. If you don't think Stetson Bennett was an elite quarterback, I'm not even for college. I'm not even having that conversation with you about elite quarterbacks. It's a necessity in college football in the playoff era to have an elite quarterback if you want to win a championship. Kyle McCord, I don't think is that. Now they have a stable of very, very good running backs. Henderson is an absolute dog. Their O-line in the run game has been impressive, but I don't think against an elite defense, Kyle McCord is going to be able to dot you up. You got to be able to throw in tight windows, and you have to capitalize on third downs. You saw the Michigan-Penn State game. When two very, very good teams play, it comes down to that one third down conversion where you stay on the field or you get off the field. Sorry, it comes down to that. And we saw multiple times in that game, Penn State capped up everything as far as the routes went. And J.J. McCarthy was able to use his legs and extend the play and make plays to keep Michigan on the field. Can Kyle McCord do that? I don't know. Now, Marvin Harrison, if he can find him, he's going to be a problem no matter what. Like I just said, the running backs are solid. As far as defense goes for Jim Knowles in Ohio State, Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator in his second year, they've done a complete turnaround pretty much from year one to year two in his system. A good defensive coordinator after his first year will have your team doing the basic things very well. They line up correctly. They tackle correctly. They take good pursuits to the football. Just assignment sound football. That's what this Ohio State defense has turned into in Jim Knowles' second year. Now, with that being said, they're very basic in what they do, Drew. Last year they were a lot more aggressive. And at the end of the season, particularly in that Georgia game, it kind of bit them in the ass. And so they went back to the drawing board, playing with everything in front of them, just playing zone, keeping everything in front, rally to the football and make plays. We'll take that all day. Michigan will take that all day. They will chip you down. They will run you down all day long. Now, I don't want to look forward at that game yet, because no matter what, a rivalry like that is going to be close. But just off the looks of it, Michigan has the quarterback advantage, and I think the defense advantage, and at home, that could be enough to get the job done.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. As always, if you enjoyed it, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We've had a lot of new subscribers come in over the past week or so, and we really do appreciate y'all. And be sure to share our channel with anyone you might know that might be interested in college football news, and we'd really appreciate that, guys. We really would. That's going to do it. We'll see you in the next one.